Let's turn to North Korea, something that people are paying attention to. You've said the Kim regime in North Korea poses a grave threat to the region and to international security and stability. What can you tell us? Help us understand where North Korea is right now in developing nuclear missiles that could hit the U.S.
Well, I can't obviously talk about anything that is classified, but there is no question that Kim very much wants this program. Hardly a week goes by when you don't hear about him testing one thing or another. I think our strategy has got to be, number one, a consistent policy. You know, one day it's like the president is rattling sabers on Twitter, and the next day his Secretary of State is saying, you know, no comment. What I believe we need is tough diplomacy backed up by international sanctions. That strikes me as the best way to go. And I know a lot of people are talking about our military capabilities here, but the reality is millions of South Koreans live less than 50 miles from the North Korean border. So you're talking about how any strike against the North Koreans could have lots of casualties and undoubtedly bring about major retaliation.
We have tried diplomacy for years, and still the Kim regime continues the nuclear program, continues testing missiles, as you said. At what point do you decide that diplomacy isn't working?
Well, what we haven't done, in my view, is really operated under the assumption that China can be a really key player here. China is one of North Korea's few international friends, and they're in a position to do a lot more. And particularly, if you look at the North Korean economy, they're just dead to rights without China. And China in terms of trade and coal and a variety of other things. I hope that this administration is going to push the Chinese very hard to be much tougher on the North Koreans in terms of their economic needs.
So China could be key. A group of lawmakers in the House wrote a letter to President Trump calling attention to his constitutional responsibility to consult and receive authorization from Congress before ordering use of military force, including any military action against North Korea that is not in response to an attack by that country. That was also signed by our representatives Bonamici, DeFazio, and Blumenauer. Why the letter? Is the Trump administration considering military action?
The letter is important because increasingly executives, and this has been the case of both political parties over the years, keep talking about expanding the president's role here. And of course, the president has a substantial role, and that's because he's commander-in-chief. But the Congress has also a very substantial role here, and that was what the War Powers Act was all about. So I very much support these efforts to ensure that the president comes before the Congress and asks for congressional authority. And by the way, George W. Bush, to his credit, did that with Iraq. I voted against going to war in Iraq. I sure wish my vote had prevailed, but at least George W. Bush came to the Congress and sought the go-ahead.